horn sheep, their seats from a motorcycle. And I was putting this work together to create this kind of visual poetry. And are you going to walk up and say, what's a tongue and a wishbone made of your arm and a leg with a matchstick on the end? You're not going to get all that. But I kind of love that there's some mystery to that. And I want it to feel poetic in a way like when you read that you don't get everything. I'm not trying to write a whole book. So when I moved out there, I'd moved from Montana. I had moved from California. And I was living in the Bay Area. In the Bay Area, I grew up in Ohio. And I moved to the Bay Area, and my eyes were like so wide. I was like a baby out there. And, there's motorcycles everywhere. And I bought a motorcycle before I went there, thinking, I'm just going to do this. I'll ride to the beach, whatever. That did not work for me. So I had this idea and this kind of romance with these motorcycles. They were everywhere, and they're so sexy and beautiful. So I was making these motorcycles, tanks and parts in grad school. And then I went out to Montana, and I moved to Montana. And I pulled in, and one of the first things I saw was, you know what these are, but I had not seen them until I moved to Montana, a truck with testicles hanging off the back. And I'm like, what in the world, where have I landed? So I thought, okay, I'm going to do this. So I added an extra testicle to my tank. And at the time I was making work that was dealing with sensuality and seduction and attraction and what that meant, both surface and interior. So there's a lot of work with fishnet stockings. And this was a kind of a nice blend. I'm very aware that I come across as a very kind of masculine with a beard. And I live in Montana, and I try and shake that a little bit personally, and even with just how I exist in the world, because I'm not, mostly I have a beard because I don't like to shave, not to accentuate any masculine part of myself. You can see here, here's that boat cleat, part of a leg with some fishnet stockings and the wishbone. And the wishbone came up a lot in my work, and the wishbone was this, a wish is something that's in front of you that you don't have. Again, it's that thing that you can't quite put your hands on. It's right in front of you. About this time I moved. I wasn't sure what I was going to do, and I went to Oregon to a wonderful residency called the LH Project. And again, when I'm going from one place to the next, really, it's put all your stuff in your truck, drive there, and figure it out when you get there. Just say, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to put myself in that place, and I can do it. So this is work I made at the LH Project, and I had a wonderful neighbor who was a hunter, and he's got decoys out in his yard, and I love that idea that decoy was, again, that kind of sense of attraction in a different way, not really in a sexual way, but more of a real simplistic, how could it be beyond just people? And you can also see here the lead component of this is a part of a sextant, which is an instrument for navigation, so that as you, again, trying to see just past where you're at. Then I met this wonderful man named Ichi Shu from China. And he said, hey, I love this work. We're building a museum in China. Can you come out here and make some work? If you come out here, we'll put you up and feed you, and you could make all this work in China, and we'll put it in the museum. So I said, great. I was still in Oregon. I'm thinking, how am I going to do this? Right about that time, these folks said, hey, we'd love to build a big piece in our yard. And I was like, great, because I need some money to go to China. So I did this, and look at this. This is like the kind of a hillbilly way to put a sculpture together. Look at all this. It's round, slippery, like a big slug. We're trying to hold it together. Here we are, getting it all together. They're thinking, what are you doing? And this is like a great example. So here's the piece. If you're never going to go take another picture of your piece, roll up the hose. Look at that. You know how many times, it's like, seriously, So the folks bought that piece. They were wonderful people who supported kind of younger artists. And I got to go to China, and I was able to work in places with people who just blew my mind. And there's an artist named Nighty, and look at this. And on the back of this is a giant McDonald's symbol. Nighty is absolutely wonderful. So this was in China. This is a Chilean artist, Katushka. Her partner, this is a hardware store. It's just out of my element. And everything felt every single thing, almost everywhere I went was different. The grass was different. The air was different. The food was different. And I don't just mean in China. In Latvia, even if you move from one state to another, you get that same feeling. So I went out there, and these are all kind of jumbled up. But here's some work in China. You can still see the different components. Here's another piece from there, a squished unicycle seat. So then around this, I went to China a bunch, and so you'll see kind of a lot. I've probably been there 5 times. And this is some work when I after China, I met a woman in China, and she said, can you come teach for me in South Carolina? So I went and did that. And from that, sorry, hang on one second. That is about this big. So I taught for her in South Carolina, and it was a great opportunity. And again, like, can you do this? Sure, let's just pick everything up, put it in the truck, and move across country. Then, because I think I said yes to things, then you start to get other things that happen. So then I got the job where I'm at in Montana. I teach at the University of Montana. So I moved back to Montana, and I'm thinking, like, I grew up in Ohio. So people are talking about deer, they're talking about horses, and I'm thinking, okay, I kind of got this. So I think I'll make a deer, I'll put some fishnet stockings on it. You can see a lead stool and another seat from a unicycle. I like that unicycle because it seems so like, just wrong, you know what I mean? It just feels like, it feels so impractical, and again, a bike is something that's so about control, and I feel like you lose that with that unicycle. So then the only thing about horses I knew was hobby horses. So this is like the kid hobby horse that you bounce on, but it's clay. Then I took everything I had, every bit, and this is, I will probably not see a lot of you again, so I'm trying to cover some ways that I think and ways that have helped me find whatever success I've found as an artist. Biggest thing I can figure out is whatever comes back into you, put it back into your work. You get a little bit of something, put it back in. Like, we built this studio with these are my students. And I said, I'll pay you whatever's fair. Help me build a studio. We got all the most kind of reclaimed stuff, all this stuff secondhand. So this studio is right behind my house. So the first thing I did when I bought a house was then build a studio. And this is an image from the inside of it. It's never been that clean since then. And it's also something look at that. Doesn't even look like my work, because that was just one winter. And I wrote down like 5 things I wanted to make, and I just made them all. And then I slaked them all down. I just wanted to see them, and then they didn't ever leave the studio. Okay. About this time, I was doing that work, and I was thinking about attraction. I was thinking about seduction. I was also thinking about beauty. But at the same time, I was trying to pinpoint a way to build the things that kind of go unnoticed, the things that are unseen. So to look at that idea of beauty, and I'm sorry, and actually, because these pieces are actually quite sexy when you stand next to them. I had all these images on my wall, and I had these this is the David, which is an obvious one, but I had all these classical Greek and Roman stone pieces. And what you can see right here, see that little tiny tree stump down there? Whoops. That's not my pointer. You can see it, see that? On so many of these, there's these tree stumps that aren't carved in the same way with this beautiful sense of craft these pieces are. They're kind of roughly hewn in, they're roughly carved, and you just kind of look past them. And they're on so many of them, and they hold the whole thing together. They support the piece, right? So what I love about that is so my pieces, I'm going to talk a little bit more about this in a minute, but I'm very interested in the way we support each other or the way we don't support each other. And I feel that today, the one thing we can do, the easiest thing, it's the kindest thing we can do for each other is just to show the simplest bit of support. So these pieces that you're going to see a bunch of them right now, because I'm still kind of in the thick of it, I took that tree, and you'll see it here. So this is really simple. So this is a really kind of a stiff version of it, and you'll see how they change. And this is still when I was using them with other elements. Here's another one. These are still in those kind of pieces that are multi-element, the more the kind of quietly poetic pieces. And I started using them here. So those are the cones, and I was referencing the rods and cones in our eyes. And you can see the wishbone at the bottom is just kind of a minor element. And then I started to separate those pieces because I was wondering, hey, can I do these on their own? And will they be strong enough? I was kind of a little bit not sure. So then I was letting those clay pieces, those clay trees, really kind of drive the work. And the other elements I started building out of steel. So folks in my class, that's all 1/4-inch steel rod. And this is real similar to what we're doing. And see how I was talking about how the work can be kind of like line in space and drawing in space. And you can see up top, you can see that street light. And as that street light comes down, it illuminates where the gold leaf is. And again, you can see that sexton on there. So then I went back to China. And they said, hey, we'd love for you to have this big show in Xi'an at this really kind of beautiful gallery. And so I went out here and I started making this work, and I went way deep. And so I started going really big, and I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to build these things. This other thing is like, check this out. Like, look at what I'm standing on, you know? It's like you just kind of go, oh, this is here. Are there ladders? Obviously. There's tons of ladders. But you know when you're kind of doing something and then it's just right next to you and you do that. I kind of love that photo. So then I built these pieces. Those are pallets, so you can see how big they are. So I built these big pieces. They have these huge kilns. I'm really excited. I had a great time. They're like, okay. I said, I'm going to go home. I got to go back to work. I'll come back in a year, and we'll fire these, and I'll have the show. I go back home, start making this work. These are these trees. I started getting into this. I never really liked glazing or putting a surface on something, and then I started to figure out, like, okay, I want movement. I want the glaze to interact with the clay. So I'm taking underglazes and I'm pouring them down these, and I'm soaking these things with water. And what I love is this thing that happens in my studio that's like, I chase these pieces. I chase them when I'm building them. I'm a builder. I'm a 100% sculptor. When I'm in my studio, I think that way, and I'm looking at these and I'm walking around and I cut them apart and I put them back together. You'll see all these different trees, but I'm trying to create something in space that gives me a feeling when I look at it that feels like I want to kind of feel thumped a little bit when I see one of these. And what's happening with the glaze, or the underglaze, is it's running down the piece. I can control it. I get to pick the color. I get to pick how much water. I get to kind of choreograph it. But then it interacts with the piece and moves through it, and I lose control again. And I love that. Because there's a lot of kind of control in the making, but there's also a thing that happens when I'm doing this and I was trying to talk to the students about this, and it's hard to explain. And I think as artists, a lot of people get this. There's this thing where you're interacting and you're in this moment that you do something with the piece, you have to respond, and there's a thing that happens in a place that you can go where you're just responding so directly to the work that it puts you somewhere else. And something happens that you can't do if I'm just kind of, casual about it. So I take this part of the process real serious. I got to pick up the pace a little bit. So I came back to China. I saw these, and I was like, oh, man, I don't like them anymore. So we broke them all. We slaked them all down, all that work. And then I go, this guy, wonderful man, he was like, I can't believe you built those things. I was like, I can't believe you did this. Look at this. And he was like, let's do something. And I said, great, because I need some help because I just crushed my whole show. So he built these. And then I put those out the top. And it was really a wonderful experience. He was so happy. I was having a great time. And then I want you to see this. Talk about like jumping into it. So then I have this whole show. We get it done. I come back. It's like I have 2 days left. There's 3 of those huge things sitting in my studio. And I have 3 days left. And I saw him. I'm like, we're done. He goes, no, let's do some big ones. I'm like, I got to go home. Do you see my shirt? That's sweat. There is a taxi right now there to pick me up. And that's what I look like for an international flight. So it was like, I had to change the clothes of the car, but it was like we had just a blast. And then so then in China, still making these pieces, I started to really get interested in how the bases and the pieces interact and how can they become less of a base and a part of the piece. So that's lead. These are pretty big. It's probably 6 or 7 feet tall. I'm going to just click and talk about them a little bit because I'm about at my time limit. I love the movement. I want them to feel like they swim through the air. I want them to kind of feel like the wind's blowing them a little bit. This is old hand-hewn timber, and I like that idea of that timber, again, the support and the structure. Here's my kiln at home. It's at the university. It's not mine. Again, you can see this connection with the old timbers. I wonder if these are stretched. Do they really look long and skinny to you? Might just be my angle. Again, working with steel, working with wood, dealing with this rising and setting on the sun and changing of days. This one has a glaze on it. Hey, folks, this is kind of like our glaze that we've got, those 2 glazes. A pink one, a giant 7-foot-tall pink tree, which I just love. This is one I just dropped off at the Archie Bray. Okay, real quick through this. I also have lots of different work I do. I just kind of focused on these. I was invited to build this. They said, how would you see an aspen grove? So I said, well, let's do it out of steel. And then here you can see it in the landscape. And as you walk past it, all these lines compress and get this real beautiful density. And for some reason, I'm forgetting the constellation that I chose. Let me think. What was it called? Anyways, sorry, I can't remember. It's kind of embarrassing. There's a constellation that I chose that rises, Cassiopeia, that rises right above these people's property. I went out there at night and looked at that and then took those stars and tried to directly drop that back down to the earth. And then that steel piece rises up. And so it's kind of this feeling of the sky coming down and the trees coming up and this kind of beautiful connection between the two. There it is if you look through the density of it. And then you would never notice that, but I like to try and put these little places in that locate this piece, so this points right to this ridge, but you would just normally walk by that. Then I'm also building these smoke plume pieces, and this is my last slide, so I'm almost done. I love this. I've got this new interest where I'm figuring these out now. So many different cultures, from incense at the Catholic Church to Vikings. People have used smoke in a way to reach something that they can't see and they can't touch and they can't quite get to, and I love that. So right now I'm trying to figure out these smoke plumes, and I'm having a great time. This is our studio at the university. I think that's my last slide. So thank you. Thanks for coming. And in all genuine seriousness, thank you for doing this, and thanks for being here and saying yes. I'm thrilled you're here. Thanks.
Thank you, Trey. It is my pleasure to introduce Tomashi Jackson. Tomashi and I go way back to Cooper Union. Tomashi was included in the 2019 Whitney Biennial, was a resident artist at the Skowhegan School of Painting and Sculpture, and received the Rappaport Prize, the Roy R. Neuberger Prize, and a Joan Mitchell Foundation Painters and Sculptors Grant. She has taught at RISD, Massachusetts College of Art, and the Cooper Union. Tomashi lives and works between Cambridge, Massachusetts, and New York City. Tomashi is teaching the Drawing on Our Surroundings workshop. Please help me welcome Tomashi to the stage.
I agree with Trey. Thank everyone for saying yes to the arts. Thank you for saying yes to visual art. Thank you, Kevin. So many thank yous. Thank you for saying yes to valuing what we all feel compelled to do, because not everyone does. All right. And then this other thing, I have to put this other thing in too. Yeah. And I brought the plug, like you told me to.
Nice work. Hey, as soon as I get back to the booth, I'll put it up on the projector. And then,
Where do you want this to go?
Let's see.
Betsy, I wear glasses now.
Okay, perfect.
It's okay.
Okay, great. I'm joined by Ivory, who's already supporting me so much. Thank you so much. Trey, man, okay, I gotta watch my own time. What a joy to come after you. You articulated so much of what I feel is the magic of my experience of the visual arts, getting to have been born a visual artist, getting to find my people along the way, getting to chase ideas, chase possibility, and to be supported by teaching artists, human beings, humanists who saw all of this. This was all a dream to me. Ooh, fun story that I have to tell y'all. I came here a couple of years ago with my curator, she's always my curator, Miranda Lash, from MCA Denver. We were working on, Kevin's working on it, right? Okay, great. So my time technically hadn't even started yet. So Miranda and I, she took me, she knows what I like. She took me way out to the Yule Quarry, which is facilitated by the Red Graniti Company. They were kind enough to host us. And took me into the quarry where the marble for the Lincoln Memorial was excavated. And they already had packed up three huge buckets of marble dust for me and shipped it to my studio in technically Somerville, Massachusetts, for me to work on paintings that sought to drop material, like to use it as a material, as an object material to explore my questions about democratic processes and histories of democracy, or the lack thereof, or the withholding thereof, in the United States and globally. And Miranda and I had met in Athens, Greece, during another residency, where I discovered that I could take marble dust from the quarry, from the Dionysus quarry, of Pentelic marble dust, the same marble that created the sacred monuments all over the Greek islands, and especially the Parthenon complex. All of that marble still has to come from the same mountain for the ongoing generational restoration project. Met a great foreman there. I'm the daughter of an operating engineer, so I love people who do that kind of work. I love people who build and who maintain infrastructure. It just really excites me. They were kind enough to let me leave with a purse full of marble dust, and then I had to get that white powder into the United States, which didn't occur to me. It didn't occur to me that was going to be a problem, because I was so driven by this desire to make something from it. It didn't, these other things don't have to occur to you when you're like deeply in the groove of possibility. So I come here, we go to the Yule Quarry, we meet wonderful people, and then we drive like mad people to try to get here before sundown, because we don't want to be on these roads with no lights. And we get here, we spend the night, we wake up, and I realize that we are at the foot of a mountain. Like there was still snow. It was like just snow, and then like Main Street, and like people ski. It was, the scale of everything blew my mind getting to visit here. And that night that I slept here, I had this very vivid dream, because I have since Betsy and I were at Cooper Union together, when we started going through some really difficult times, when we started experiencing, very, very serious ramifications of the devaluation of visual arts and fine arts practices, even in a school that is partially dedicated to it, even at a place that is historically among all of us known as being like one of the most important places for undergraduate study, focused, like dedicated study, discipline, rigor for the visual arts, even us. With a 150-year history, we started going through it, and the value of our place as visual artists in that place was like literally demolished. And so since then, I've had this uneasy feeling about the state of accessible art education and rigorous, disciplinary, grounded art education that has like saved my life. I became really worried about that. So my first school was the San Francisco Art Institute, and we all know what happened there. The oldest art school west of the Mississippi River. So what am I gonna do? I don't know. I'm just like really unnerved and really worried. And I have this dream where I see this art school that's outside. I saw an art school outside, and I woke and I felt relieved to be there. And it was like a community where there was no doubt about the nature of the investment there. I'm burning through my time. I need to stop. But I just want to tell you that I had this dream, and then Miranda brought me here before we drove back to Denver. And as soon as we parked and I got out and I walked into the campus, I was like, oh my God, this is what I saw in my dream. Thank goodness I don't have to build it from scratch. Because I woke up feeling this heavy pressure of responsibility, like, well, I'm like 40-something. I better get to work. I better get to work if this is what I'm supposed to do, so that, to help make sure that other places for serious, rigorous practice in visual art and the ways that we do things that only we can even know how to care for. You can't just pick somebody off the street and ask them to like run your litho press. Where is it? You know what I mean? Not everybody's Lorenzo Clayton. So, so I was like relieved when I got here that I had seen this place in a dream the night before and it already existed. So I'm incredibly honored to be here. Let's get started. So, none of that counted. We did time this, so thank you, Ivory, for your support. So I wanted to start with a project that I did at the Parish Museum. This is 2001. I wanted to start because I get to be here to teach this drawing class, or to facilitate a drawing class. I believe we make spaces for us to get each other and to be serious. And the value of the time that we spend together. This is something I picked up from Byron Kim when I was at Cooper and then at Yale. The quality of our time together is based entirely upon our willingness to be rigorous, honest, and generous with each other in this practice. So I believe we facilitate space together. That's what I'm here to do. And I hope to give as much goodness. As you said, we make and then we pour it back. We pour it back into the practice, and we pour it back into the other artists that we get to work with and facilitate for and pass things down to. We're a part of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years of artists passing things down to people. That's all. That's all I believe that we're here for. So that's like some mystical thing telling me to move it along. So this project, The Land Claim, I wanted to start with this drawing that I made. Let me go full view. With this drawing these notes that I took when I visited the east end of Long Island. Some people just refer to it as the place as the Hamptons. I had been invited there to make a body of work. Thank God for the Watermill Center for the Arts. Really, a place for thespians, but they make room for us. Really, really grateful that they made room for me there. And so I got to meet with people, Black, Indigenous, and Latinx people of the east end of Long Island. Here's a partial drawing of the face of Richard Junie Wingfield, who's like third generation. It says right here, he was born and raised in Southampton in Long Island, New York, third oldest of 27 grandchildren of the Wingfield family. His family went there in the 1800s and formed the First Baptist Church. They went there from the Carolinas. The men were farmers, the women were domestics. A place to seek refuge in a fortress. No other invitations to white-dominated spaces, and I should focus on what I highlighted. The fabric here is dense, policies spoken and unspoken that govern the lives of his people. The Parish Museum current location was a potato field where Junie's parents picked potatoes and were eventually poisoned by the pesticides that were sprayed upon them. So this was on February 1st, 2020. I wanted to note this bit because Ivory and I are going to read to you. We're gonna use this lecture as an opportunity for me to try something, which is to be less nervous about time and just to be grounded and to read something to y'all and not explain it to you. We're gonna read from the project. So this catalog, this is like my first real deal catalog. And the project, you see February 2020 was when I was there, and then I wasn't able to go back for more than a year because of the COVID-19 public health crisis and associated lockdowns. So what I got to do was I got to work with a small research team that had already started forming around a previous project to facilitate conversations with my discussants and to document them and then to transcribe them. We found that in order to share work with people when people could not safely gather together, we had to put it in a book. This catalog ended up being a container. I wanted to find another term other than a Trojan horse, maybe a Russian nesting doll or a Twinkie. It was, the container is the catalog that has the beautiful plates and stuff, but inside of it is what precipitates the paintings, and I will show you one of the paintings, which are these conversations with people who are constantly not heard in that space, not acknowledged in that space. So one of these conversations happens with Kelly Dennis, who at the time worked at the Watermill Center. She's a Shinnecock woman, and she studied land rights law. She's a lawyer. So Kelly, right before I left, Kelly told me that there's a high presence of KKK in Hampton Bays, that the golf course doesn't pay taxes, that Junie said that the golf course doesn't pay taxes, which starves the school system. But what she told me about, we're about to bring you into is a conversation with Kelly about the land claim, which ends up, it's like there's this magic moment where I'm sitting in a kitchen with her. She's talking to me about the Shinnecock people and about the land claim that she just assumed that I knew. And there's that, Trey just described it all so much better than I can. I just knew what the show was supposed to be called. I thought that the work was gonna be about transportation, the lack of public transportation and the targeting of migrant people who were there to work informally and then who end up targeted by police and stopped and separated from their families and sent into ICE detention when they're out there trying to, take care of lawns and take care, do the work that everybody wants them there to do. What it ended up being about was so much more. So why don't you start off, because I've been running my mouth.
Start from We Come?
Yeah, so this is our interview with Kelly Dennis Esquire, our leader women, the backbone of our people.
We come from a matriarchal tribe where our leader...
Introduce her.
Okay. Kelly Dennis Esquire is an attorney specializing in federal Indian law who has represented the Shinnecock Indian Nation and other sovereign tribal nations on matters related to land rights, civil rights, and cultural and natural resource protection. She's also the public programs and residency coordinator at the Watermill Center.
She was.
On April 6, 2021, Kelly was elected Secretary of the Council of Trustees for the Shinnecock Indian Nation. In our discussion, Kelly chronicles the history of the Shinnecock Indian Nation's movement to reclaim stolen land and a 32-year fight for federal recognition. She also speaks about the lack of affordable housing on the East End. We come from a matriarchal tribe where our leader women, Sung-Squaw, have been the backbone of our people. Kwashawam was one of the first women leaders, Noadona's daughter as well. There have been strong women forever in the tribe. Princess Noadona, who was my grandmother's generation, was one of the people to inspire me to keep on working towards the land claim. Even though women weren't able to speak or vote in tribe meetings, she would always be the one to break the mold and say, "When are we getting our Shinnecock Hills back?" She'd also stand up against other encroachments on the lands that were happening. The women were looked to as part of this hunter-gatherer society, and corn, beans, and squash were what we were often planting. Before colonization, men were hunters, and the whale was what they would go after. That was often a very difficult process of trying to whale, but that was what we were known for. That was what we taught the colonists to do when they arrived, and what made the whaling industry such a huge thing before they found gold out west.
And we're going to jump to this other one, to this next one. And I should also say that these drawings were made by Martha Schnee as a part of our flowering bush methodology, what I'd like to refer to as a faith-based productive methodology for making work, to ask questions and have faith that visual art can hold it. That's my question always. Like, can art hold this for me? Can art history hold this for me? And Martha ended up being the one to make the drawings for our project. Thank you. Okay. So, the land claim boils down to what happened in the year 1859 when New York State passed legislation to authorize Southampton to illegally get rid of the 1,000-year lease promising us the Shinnecock Hills, which was over 4,000 acres of land. They promised that to us for 1,000 years in 1703 and broke that promise in 1859. When the transaction occurred, our ancestors immediately denied that the transaction was lawful. Only a minority of the tribe whose names were on the petition were accurate. Others were forged, and the ones who did sign were made by undue influence, alcohol-involved oppressive conduct. They hired an attorney to put in a complaint on July 25, 1859, about 3 months after the illegal transaction took place. That complaint was ignored, and the case never went to trial. The lawsuit was pending and has been ever since, even after we submitted a petition to the U.S. Supreme Court in 2016. That never got heard on the merits, and as long as nothing gets heard on the merits, it's still alive.
We never had our day in court about what was promised to us and what was illegally taken from us. That is a land where there's so much happening. I, for the first time yesterday, went at sunset to an area called Sugarloaf in the Shinnecock Hills. I always think about going up there, but I didn't want to trespass or get arrested. It is at highest point of the Shinnecock Hills at Sugarloaf, and it's been recorded by archaeologists as very sensitive to the Shinnecock Nation. We buried our ancestors in that area. There was a massive archaeological dig that uncovered many of our ancestors' bones and ceremonial objects. I was able to just go up there yesterday. I could see everything. I could see from one side of the South Fork to the other. I could see to the Peconic Bay to the north side, all around to the Shinnecock Bay on the south side. I could see the canal that opens up into the Atlantic Ocean. I was like, oh my God, this is where Creator knows that my ancestors would gather and hold ceremonies. This is where our ancestors were. The sun sets there, and they're buried there, and their graves were facing west so that they would be on their journey to the spirit world Creator. Thankfully, there is more protection there. Still, it's the entire Shinnecock Hills and all the high points on the western side where we have many of our ancestors buried. That's what we believe and continue to do on the land that we still own and occupy here on the Shinnecock Neck adjoining the Shinnecock Hills.
They put us on a peninsula after 1859. It is beautiful and we love it. It's our home. It's only 800 acres in comparison to the over 4,000 acres up to the Shinnecock Canal, where we would drag our canoes because we are people of the ocean, the bays, and the waters. We make do with what we can here on the Shinnecock Neck Reservation. It's marshlands, so you can't really build up on it or farm it too much. It's susceptible to flooding. We've had realtors come up here and try to take it from us still, even in spite all that. It's just the reality of how we've been able to survive in this space where we are surrounded by the 1%. This is where segregation began in the Hamptons and still exists today. This is the only place where I'm ever going to be if I continue to live out here and work out here. This is the only place I can afford to live. The Shinnecock Hills Golf Course was developed after the land claim, but it's still a horrible thing. The Shinnecock people were made to work to build that course, and in 1891, it was said that 150 Shinnecock tribal members assisted in weighing out the first totals of what was to become the golf club. They were the only available labor, and William Dunn, the Scottish course developer, said several years into development, this place was dotted with Indian burial mounds, and we left some intact at bunkers in front of the greens. We scraped out some of the mounds and made sand traps. One never knew when an explosion shot out a sand trap that would bring out a couple of firewater flasks or perhaps a bone or two. It was said that at least 16 graves were removed from where the Shinnecock Hills Golf Club announced that happening in 1902. I have records of the different pits. The town of Southampton has long acknowledged the presence of our Shinnecock remains in the Shinnecock Hills. The town records show that we had a large cemetery near the front, about halfway between Southampton Village and the Shinnecock Hills. There was a considerable settlement about Canoe Place, where those graves are still. That is in the 1918 records of the town of Southampton. They know.
Our people have been fueled by alcohol and substance abuse. It continues on and is a huge issue still for us. It's tied to the labor issue and how we were the only available labor to help in the desecration of our own lands, building this golf course and the railroad through it. We did so with flasks full of whatever liquor they're providing us, the firewater flask. In June 1884, Shinnecock tribe members attended the celebration of the 15th anniversary of the Long Island Railroad at the Shinnecock Hills train station. A photograph of Shinnecock people taken that day states, "The last of the Shinnecock Indians." They were saying in 1884 that we are already an extinct people, and we're not. It's a long history of pursuing this land claim because we're still here, and we're asserting our rights. We exist. It's a continuation of this paper genocide that is happening. We assert who we are and continue on. The land claim is a part of that.
Awesome. Okay, so I'm just gonna hop really quickly to the painting that was inspired by a family photograph that Kelly generously shared with us as a part of our archival collection for this methodology that we employed. This is called Among Cousins. Can't even get into how this painting came together, but it was I really needed the space around me to tell me what to do. I was really struggling one day and painting there at Watermill. And Kelly's cousin, Tila, who is also a land rights attorney, just dropped by. She always seemed to know when to drop by. I didn't have to call her. And she just dropped by and said she was going to take me to a part of the reservation I had never visited, and I had to be accompanied. I had to be invited to be there. And it was a beach. And she took me through this thicket, and it opened up into this view of the Peconic Bay, and it told me what I needed to do to complete this painting. I'd have to show you studio images to really show you how wild it was. But this, I'm sorry, I thought this was among cousins. This is among heirs, Nyamuk and Azarest. So there's the image of Kelly and her cousins playing in their grandmother's basement, projected in halftone lines. So I'm a painter and a printmaker. Yeah, so printmaking really transformed the way my brain worked when I was able to spend years at the Cooper Union print shop on the 5th floor growing up. And over the years, I have figured out how to merge painting and printmaking and to project printmaking language through halftone line into these irregular surfaces that I made that are caked with site-specific materiality. In this case, wampum dust collected from their other cousin. Everybody's related down there. Their cousin Shane, who is at the time was studying to be a holy man, and as a young person had cut wampum on another part of the reservation, was kind enough to bring me a paste that I had to let dry and then rehydrate to paint into this surface. But that's among heirs. Okay, all right, we got a plan. I swear we have a plan. Okay, I'm going back to my things. All right, I'm gonna open these up in the order that they're supposed to be in, and that is what's gonna happen. Okay, so the next thing that Ivory and I were talking about, so there's, surviving land dispossession. What do survivors do? And it's very, I don't want to meander and mumble, but that was the land claim. This is the Great Society. So areas of public concern, issues of public concern. How do I embed issues of public concern into these paintings such that they are felt and not didactically told? That is an intention that formed, that crystallized while I was studying in a rigorous, serious place where people expanded, welcomed me and allowed me to expand my notions of what was possible for painting. I painted murals as a girl in the Bay Area, as a young person in the Bay, because I started out at SFAI. But I dropped out of school so that I could be an apprentice to muralists. So I could be an apprentice to practicing artists in the Bay Area, and they took me under their wing. And so I have this compulsion to engage issues of public concern that implicate us all, whether or not we recognize how we are implicated. So issues of governance, access to education, housing, human rights. In this case, this project, The Great Society, went further into questions that I had that began with my inquiry into school desegregation, which I was able to really get into when I was a student at Yale. Years later, after dropping out and then going to Cooper, going to MIT, being a nanny for 2 years, I started painting again. I ended up at Yale. And a friend of mine was working in coalition with Boston educators to try to save what was left of Yellow school bus service. I didn't understand that transporting children to and from school safely was a problem. Very confused about that. And when I got to Yale, I spent time in the law library to study the Brown cases. There was so much that I didn't know as a directly implicated beneficiary of this legislation package. So years later, I start to understand that it was not just school desegregation. It was the Voting Rights Act, it's the Civil Rights Act, it's Medicare, it's Medicaid, it's Social Security, and it's the creation of the National Foundation for the Arts, which gives us the National Endowment for the Arts and the National Endowment for the Humanities. This is where I land. I land at a very imperfect LBJ. That's to put it lightly. But I want to focus on the fact that the first time in 1963, this image in blue is of the image that's printed in halftone line on vinyl and meant to crosshatch with the painted imagery into the surface of this piece called the Morehouse Creed, is an audience, the first audience to hear LBJ declare what his intentions were for the Great Society the Great Society package, which included art and culture as an integral part of a developing society, of a society that was going to be able to sustain itself. That every person must have the right to create for the sake of creating, to learn for the sake of learning, and to reach for their dreams. They have to. And he was a staunch New Dealer who cut his teeth under FDR. So this is inspired by the WPA. So it's like, years and years and years into asking these questions, trying to visualize them through painting, I get further and further into realizing just how awash and how shaped I am by these forming of public space through value. So that's the Morehouse Creed. This is across the universe. So one audience, I didn't tell you about the other audience. The audience that's painted into the surfaces is the audience at Morehouse College, hearing Nina Simone sing to them for the first time and the only time to a packed house, To Be Young, Gifted, and Black in 1969. And what moved me about this video, this digitized video from this film that I saw of this moment, is like how they rise with all of this joy. People are just like beside themselves. It's a mixed group, but people are beside themselves, because they've endured like 10 years plus of just nonstop assassinations and brutality in response to their public call for human rights. So it was this joy that I wanted to embed into this surface. All of them are caked with marble dust from the Ewell Quarry. All of them are made of the same stuff as the mall on Washington. All of them are made of the same stuff as the Lincoln Memorial. And the guys in that quarry, they love that history. It's so fun to be with them. Yeah, and so when I painted this was the first time that I painted black on these black paper bags that I soak in water and I laminate into the surface, because I want them to allow me to stretch that surface onto these awning-style frames. Shane Weeks back at Watermill Center told me that when he came into the studio and saw them curing on the walls, they looked like deer hide. When I stepped back and saw this, I had to get up the guts to paint black on black. But it's not just black on black on this marble dust, which then left this image that looked to me like a galaxy or like a universe. Music is a part of a lot of my work, and music is a part of me. So the title seemed, it just came across the universe. It was just right there. And then this becomes the title of my show, my first solo survey show that was organized here in Colorado at MCA Denver. So I don't intend to tarry here long. I just wanted to nod and to acknowledge to MCA Denver for bringing me here and bringing me to Swoon Art House, bringing me out here to Anderson Ranch, and expanding my notion of what was possible. I made a new body of work just about Colorado and experiences of Black people and self-possession in Boulder and Denver and beyond, from the 1800s to the present, inspired by a film called This Is Not Who We Are, that I got to see at Chautauqua when I was here a couple of years ago. And so here, I wanted to show you all this because there's sand from southern Colorado, there's marble dust from Marble, Colorado, and then there's soil from the Red Rocks amphitheater site. And just images of joy in spite of, images of creating their own classrooms and their own resorts and campsites and in spite of. Okay, so that's that. Oh, and this is the downstairs. We wanted to make sure that you saw what it looked like downstairs. It was a 2-floor show. It then traveled to ICA Philly, and it's just about to open at I didn't mean to close that. It's just about to open. Oh, there it is. This is what we want to show you, the downstairs. So then it's going to travel some more. It's opening at Tufts University Art Gallery in Medford, Massachusetts, before it goes to ICA San Francisco and ends at CAM in Houston, where I was born, just so happens. And so this is the last thing that we want to show you. And I'm going to show you this in silence. It will speak for itself if I can just unnervous myself and go full screen. This is the last project that I completed for the gallery that I'm represented by in London. And I work with 3 galleries. I want to acknowledge them because we are all a team. They support me and I get to support these projects and, you know, everything that Trey said. So the Great Society was at Jack Tilton Gallery in New York City. I work with Night Gallery in Los Angeles, and this was at Pilar Carias Gallery in London. Clubs, dance halls, festivals, the drum circle, the house party, and freestyle hip-hop ciphers. All of these sound systems are conduits of community. My name is Tomashi. I'm a visual artist. I use multiple media to explore painting and printmaking. This is my sneaky way of showing you all the pieces. I look for similarities, comparisons, and differences in public space, specifically around issues of governance, such as transportation, housing, justice, labor, education. All of these issues impact how any one of us or all of us collectively experience public space wherever we are. This current project on view in the gallery is the product of research focused on multi-generational events of uprising and rebellion sparked by police violence and demonstrations for educational access met with excessive force throughout history in London and in Los Angeles. I identified a lot with those histories and their repetitiousness here in Great Britain because I'm from Los Angeles, where there is also a rich history of multiplicitous generational rebellions to police violence that exists simultaneously with cultural development, production, and creativity. As I began to ask questions in Los Angeles and London about people's living memories of these rebellions and uprisings, music showed up over and over again as a subject, as a reason for gathering, for joy, for sanctuary, and as a characteristic among communities targeted by police and abuse of power.
On the evening of the second day, the smoldering resentment turned into violence.
One of the pieces in the show takes its title from Stuart Hall's seminal text, Policing the Crisis. It's been an important text for me to understand the importance of the critical, cultural, theoretical work that was happening here in the 1970s and the 1980s. The piece I'm with now is called After the Dance. The bag handles, along with brass grommets that are hooked onto the frame, are a nod to the architectural function of an actual awning that is used to protect people from the elements, from sun, from heat. The black areas of the surface are embedded with 3 gradient layers of paste mixed from palm tree frond collected in Los Angeles, burned into ash. And I'm especially excited about getting to use this because of my own memories from 1992, from the uprising in Los Angeles, when the city burned and rained ash for 4 or 5 days and nights. I've developed a practice of collecting materials from the sites that I research, such as the poplin collected here in London and used to make fine men's white dress shirts, something that I've seen a lot of here in the neighborhood on the corner of Savile Row and Conduit Street. And then, of course, there's materials that allow me to employ more lofty symbology beyond the location, such as the marble dust collected from the Ewell Quarry in Colorado, where the Lincoln Memorial was quarried. A monument that becomes symbols and signifiers for democratic processes, for the potential or the promise of human rights. I use them because the history of the events in the work betrays the contradiction that many of us experience with these promises of participatory democracy and human rights.
Most of the energy had gone from this, and people just wanted to leave. But they weren't allowed to.
In making this work, I'm reminded that the repetitive presence of violence is devastating and heartbreaking. And the repetitive nature of creative productivity emerges always and provides hope. That's the pattern that I see. So that was a new track that was made by the artist and the musician Gordon Mokes, the co-founder of Block Party and the bassist from that. I don't know if anyone's old enough to remember Block Party in this room. But that was the album that I listened to on repeat when I first got to Cooper Union. And yeah, he ended up being a part of our research group, visiting archives, collecting materials and stories, and he made that new track for this show. So wanted to end with some music. Thank you. Thank you. I think that's all.
So folks, we'll have a brief Q&A. We'll have Trey and Tomashi come up here, and we have limited time for a few questions. Does anyone have a question to start with?
And you guys, the mic, and I'll fix the lights too.
Okay.
Okay. Over here.
My question is more specifically for Trey, but I guess you could both answer. You talk a lot about saying yes to opportunity and different things that come up. Could you touch base on a time where you had to hold some restraint and maybe say no, and we're grateful for that, or just a time where saying no could potentially be more beneficial than saying yes?
I haven't done that a lot, but I think that I'm a little bit farther along in my career now that now I just had this conversation with a friend of mine today. Now I say yes to things that I think, that sounds like fun. You know, sometimes people ask me to do that, and I'm like, I don't know if I really want to do that right now. That doesn't, like, what, I can be a little bit more particular, and I'm not saying that in a grandiose way, but I feel a little bit, as I've gotten older now, that I can say, this is good for me to do, you know? Whereas when I was young, I'm not exaggerating, I've truly felt that it was all good for me to do. I would just, like, I was just a believer and just jump in and do it. So I guess in hindsight, I would say, you know, if I'm asked to do something and it's, it doesn't feel like I get my half out of it, because I'm happy to put in other half for everybody else, but I feel like there's an interaction, and I think we both spoke to this a little bit, and I'm looking for my half as well these days, you know.
You think so? Okay. Yeah, to saying yes. Yeah, there was a time when I was like, I think I was like 20, and I dropped out of SFAI. I deferred. We called it deferment. My mother called it dropping out. She was like, I'm cutting you off because I can't support you not being in college. But this was before the first .com bubble burst, and you know, like affordable housing really has a lot to do with how we can build community and be in proximity with each other to create opportunities and just say yes to stuff. So my experience in the Bay was people like always said yes to painting on a mural. Like friends would like ride, people are just riding their bikes or walking by. People were like hot to like get onto a mural just to help in the Mission, in the Fillmore, wherever. So yeah, I was working on a bunch of different projects. My mentors saw that I would paint and I would paint and I would build scaffolding and I would climb scaffolding. Even if I was afraid of heights, I would clean tools. I said yes to cleaning tools. I said yes to organizing pallets. I said yes to creating pulley systems to pull water buckets up 4 or 5, you know, flights of whatever up scaffolding. I just said yes because I just wanted to paint. And so then that would turn into another opportunity because I could be trusted. I could be trusted. At one point I remember being invited to so my dreams are based on visual arts and visual arts education practices. I kind of told myself when I deferred from school, if dreams X, Y, and Z can come true, then I will do what I'm really afraid to do, which is apply to Cooper and go to New York and be away from my family, which I'm terribly afraid of doing. If I can be an assistant to master teachers, if I can then learn how to teach or facilitate a class, if I can assist master muralists, if I can learn how to design and paint a mural, if I can lead a team, if I can follow and then learn how to lead, I'll do that. If somebody will invite me to have a show in a gallery and those paintings, like I'll have these confirmations that this is what I'm meant to do and not just something that I'm doing because I'm afraid to do something else. And at one point, I had an invitation from like 2 artist elders to assist them on mural projects for the new SFO expansion, for for a mural in Bayview Hunters Point and teaching, assistant teaching in the mission or something. And I was afraid to say yes because I thought I was gonna mess it up. Like I suddenly became like really afraid that I was gonna drop a ball and that I was gonna fail or that I was gonna let somebody down. And I got encouragement to just say yes, like just to say yes. And it all got done. And I learned, I got dream learning, like dream affirming learning from each and every one of those things. But I acknowledge now, there are times when I'm like facilitating with students and I just want to be like, I would just want you to go to this city. Like, I don't actually want you to be in a school right now. You can transfer back in whatever, like, I just want you to go to this city and like work with some people, like go work in some shops. You should go work in a foundry. You should go be an assistant somewhere right now. But so much has been disorganized by the disruption of working class communities. I don't know what to say anymore. So I was able to say yes to a lot of things because people were around making opportunities happen and teaching me how to make opportunities happen. And I'm grateful for that. Yeah, and now I need more naps. So I'm trying to practice, being discerning.
Hey, Tomashi.
Hey, Nancy Lovendahl. You can have ours if you want it.
Hello?
There we go. Hey. Thank you so much for sharing all of your subject matter. The depth of the social justice is extraordinary and meaningful. My question for you is, how do you cross-section that with your color palette? It is so cheerful and beautiful with this depth of concerns.
Well, as an over-institutionalized artist trained by mostly Western trained artists, I have adopted the belief that it's not my role to impose like emotional symbolism onto color. Color is just color. So what I am having fun with, like with After the Dance, was what I have fun with all of them. Wherever there's white, wherever it's photographing white, it's not white. So like with After the Dance, I like that video because you can see that it's like many oranges, many pale oranges that are playing with the eventual intersection of blue that comes from the halftone lines in the vinyl. So yeah, I'm kind of enjoying getting old. I'm enjoying getting older as an artist because I've been so insecure about my relationship to color since like forever. I thought everybody else had an instinctive understanding and I just didn't. But because I was an assistant for so long, so I needed other people to tell me what to do. Like, here's where we study John Biggers and we study Diego Rivera, Si Quiero Son Orozco. That's what we were doing in the Bay then. People who were like, mural hungry and in the Mission District and in Balmy Alley and stuff like that. So, like there are emotional tones that are associated with the way that we're using colors intentionally to tell certain stories, like to tell, the Central American Father Romero stories, the things that my elders had been doing. But when I was left on my own, I didn't really know what I wanted to do with color. And now I enjoy that, color has, that there are tones, that there are shades, I feel like I need to go back to school. I'm forgetting words, but I just have I'm much more comfortable with just like looking at the work that I've been doing, be like, hey, I haven't made anything with green in a while. And if I'm gonna make something with green, that means there's gonna be an opportunity for mauve or, like not just like bright red. Like I'll have an opportunity to, play with like pale roses. I'll have an opportunity to, take that 3-mile walk between home and the studio and keep my eyes open for things, how green is relating to other things in the space around, So, and if it's blue, it's gonna be orange or something warm. If it's hot, it's gonna be something cold that's gonna interact with it. That's all. Yeah, there's no, I have no political agenda with the color. The color is just the color that holds everything else. There's a lot of color happening. Do you want to ask him that question too?
I'm happy to talk about color.
Yeah. I mean,
I think a lot of times when I think about those pieces, I'll mix up all these different cups and I'll have all this color next to me. And then I just interact with it, and same thing the students are doing in the space. You know, we have all this color laid out, and you pour one and then you react to it. And it's like, what I'm also doing though is, it's easy for me to end up in this like strange like color theory battle on those pieces, because I'll do something and then I'm like, why do I hate that? You know, and then I can't figure out. So then I have like actually pared some of them down so I don't end up kind of fighting this color next to that one so much. And but how I get to some of my color choices is I want the pieces to feel like they're part of the atmosphere. So I'll look and I'll see, like I just pulled a piece out of the kiln and I was saying how it feels kind of stormy. So I look to the sky, honestly, a lot for color and for colors that work together. And I love that because I know that works. You know what I mean? I'm kind of telling you honestly. Because I have done so many times where I've looked at this and I'm like, why do I hate this? And it becomes, then I just kind of like run into something so many times that it doesn't work anymore. And then I lose this space that I'm trying to describe, which is that interaction and that kind of beautiful spot that you can find when things are really working. But if I'm having a color conversation in my head, I can't get there. So sometimes I limit them. You'll see like that big pink one. I was also like, am I really making a giant pink sculpture? And I love that piece, you know? And so I got to be, and I don't totally overthink color either. I love the way you said that. I used a lot of blues, and I used those blues because I was transitioning from thinking about sight and how we see. I mentioned I was using those cones from the rods and cones in our eyes, which made me research sight a little bit, which then led me into this thing, and this is not deep research, this is like radio lab research, which was how blue was one of the last colors that they believe our eyes could see, and I kind of love the sweetness of that, so I started to use blue a lot. Blue has a real history in ceramics too, but honestly, it looks good going down those pieces, you know, and that interaction and that connection to the sky. It's really simple, but I feel like it works.
There was a period of time when I took all color out of my palette when I first got to Cooper, when I went back to school after 7 years, because I felt like I was color drunk from painting murals and working on murals and looking at murals. And I wouldn't allow myself to use any color. I wanted to make myself deal with whatever material I came across as it was. A lot of chosen found materials, plastics. I was interested in translucency. But when color came back, it was blue, because I spent time in Central America and I had these pictures of the ocean and of the sky from the prop plane that took me back to the main airport. So blue ended up being the first color that reintroduced me to what color might mean for me.
Thank you both. Oh, okay. We've really running over time, but we'll take one more.
Sorry.
Maybe this won't take long. It's not so much a question, but maybe a prompt that I found between both your presentations. If you can both speak to, I guess, I would say something between the fragment and abstraction, because I feel like Tomashi, with your work, the fragment seems to happen at the level of, say, the archival material, and also I think there is a level of how you deal with abstraction, both in how the work is put together, but also the relationship between colors. And I think I would say the same with you, how you put the objects together, whether it's a fragment from a body part or a part from, some kind of machinery, and also how abstraction plays a role in how the thing comes together, right? So I wonder if both can, how do you think about abstraction, or how do you think about the fragment in relation to abstraction?
I love that question. And I'll try and keep this succinct. I think that I use a lot of recognizable forms. And sometimes when we look at those forms, we do this in our daily lives. We see something as tree, chair, and we see the full object in its natural orientation. We kind of check it off in our head. I found that if I change the orientation of that form, or if I use just an element of that form, or kind of truncate that, you start to look at the form in a new way, like it's not something that you expected to see, because it's not, even if it's the simplicity of flipping the orientation, you look at, your eye moves through that form in a different way, and I'm very interested in how the viewer's eye travels along my work, and how you moved, how can I move your eye through the work with both form and color. I also I never wanted to feel like I had to give you the whole thing. You know, you can get to figure through arm, you could get to figure through tongue, you know? So there's just these elements, and I felt like there was a different power in that than me illustrating or building the whole object.
I'm such a fan. I wanna close with something that points to the fact that you all invited me here to teach a painting class, and I said I want to teach figure drawing, or a facilitated figure drawing class, because there's so much abstraction to be found in meditation on the figure. Yeah, I don't know if I know how to answer that prompt. Yeah, I don't know if I know how to answer that. Abstraction, would you say abstraction and form? Or like, how do I?
And the fragment.
And the fragment. Yeah, so, yeah, I don't know. I just love making art. I don't know. I mean, I feel like the work will tell us. I don't know. I think we do the work, whatever the work is, whatever we're observing or whatever's moving through us, and then it shows us. It's not something that I can, in my own experience, because my natural orientation is figuration. I grew up getting to go to figure drawing classes from 15 to 18, and then studying these murals, and everything was about the figure. So I feel like that is the first place where I started to see that abstraction was possible, with hours-long sessions of figure drawing, then being like encouraged to zoom in, so like encouraged to like draw from a heroic proportion, to like put oneself below the figure so that you have to look up, and this amazing thing that happens when this two-dimensional surface becomes sculptural, like when we can move shadow and a few marks and some lines and a little pressure and a little absence of pressure, and then there's this illusion that there's a physical shape happening inside of this thing that's actually flat, that that we can push into something, that we can put our hand, like something's pushing back in there. And we know good and damn well that it's physically not possible, technically, for that to be happening. But here we are physically being a part of it happening. I feel like those moments invite zeroing in on the corner of a hip into a glute, or just the back. Those moments, I feel like, whisper to what abstraction and fragmentation can be, and however one works, whatever one's working in. Love you, Betsy.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. And remember that Tomashi and Trey are here all week, so if you think of a question or you had a question, go ahead and ask
like
them.
Lounge singers. We'll be here all week.
So thank you. Remember,
Don't
we
you
have
go changing.
orientation tomorrow at 8:45.
Thank y'all.